Hey guys, tonight we're going on a dusty, slightly wobbly stroll through the ancient world right into the heart of southern Mesopotamia. You're waking up in the city of Ur, one of the oldest known urban centres in human history. The sun hasn't even cracked the eastern edge of the desert yet, but the goats are already complaining, and your clay alarm clock, a rooster, is screeching at full volume. You stretch bones creaking like a poorly fired pot, and blink away the sleep still surrounded by the scent of burnt incense and something faintly resembling fish stew. It's around 2500 BCE. You live in a single-room mud-brick house with your cousin's goat, and an ongoing debate about who ate the last of the pickled leeks. You're a scribe in training, lucky you. Unlike field labourers or brick haulers, you get to use a stylus instead of a shovel. That said, your commute still begins the same way, with sand in your sandals, and at least one chicken blocking the door. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love hearing from all of you sleepy historians around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise from your mat, scratch your head, and reach for the reed mat that serves as a curtain door. Outside, the world is beige. Not metaphorically, actually beige. Dust hangs in the air, like yesterday's gossip. The Tigris winds its slow muddy path to the east, and distant palm groves shimmer like a mirage. From somewhere nearby, a fishmonger starts shouting about fresh river eels, which is a very generous interpretation of what's actually in his baskets. You splash your face with water from a clay jar. It's warm. Because of course it is. Cold water is for royalty and for dreams. Next to you, a neighbour grunts as he climbs out from under his blanket of woven wool, swatting away a cloud of gnats. You offer a sleepy wave and he replies by coughing phlegm into a pot. The Morning Symphony. Historians still argue whether the average Sumerian woke up before dawn for religious reasons, or simply because the heat made sleeping past sunrise an exercise in sweaty futility. Whatever the cause, you're up, you're sore, and you already regret agreeing to copy the Temple of Nana's grain receipts today. Now if you're wondering whether people back then had breakfast, yes they did. But don't expect eggs Benedict. You reach into a clay pot and retrieve a handful of cold barley mash left over from last night's dinner. It's chewy, sticky, and oddly comforting, like edible mortar. There's also a small hunk of dried goat cheese nearby, but it smells like it's been communing with demons. Still you eat. A quick prayer to Utu, the sun god, because you're not about to tempt fate this early in the day. You mutter something about light on my path and strength in my legs, even though Utu probably hears about 10,000 of these mumble prayers every hour. And then comes your daily ritual with the goat. The goat lives in your house, not in a cute, cuddly all pets kind of way, but more in a there's nowhere else to put her and she's probably more valuable than you sort of arrangement. Her name is possibly Aylar, but you just call her Hey Move. She stands squarely in front of the door, like she owns the place, chewing your cousin's sandal strap, with the smug expression of an animal who knows she's legally untouchable. Eventually, you nudge her aside and step out into the alley. The clay walls are close to the sky, a thin slice above. Someone's already sweeping the dust off their doorstep, a noble yet futile act that historians now call ritual cleanliness, and you call pointless until it rains again in 5 months. Sumerians lived close literally and socially. Houses shared walls, gossip shared airspace, and privacy was something reserved for temple gods. You tiptoe past a toddler squatting in the road and nod politely at a matriarch glaring out from her doorway. You don't know her name, but you're fairly certain she knows yours and what you did with the bean pot last week. You shuffle past clay plaques baked into house walls, primitive address markers. The one next to the brewer's home reads something like, Home of Dubsar, son of Ilumaka, of Beer, father of complaints. You don't know if that's self-deprecating or just Sumerian Yelp. By the time you reach the main alley, you've dodged 2 chickens, 1 cartwheel, and an elderly man who insists the moon has been tilted ever since the last eclipse. This too is part of the morning routine. Here's your first mainstream fact for the night. Sumerian cities like Ur were organised with a remarkable level of urban planning for their time-featuring gridded streets, designated districts, and even drainage systems. Of course, these drainage systems often backed up during floods and doubled as hiding places for stray pigs, but still impressive. And now for your fringe facts, some cuneiform tablets from later periods include complaints about noisy neighbours, smelly streets, and people who scatter fish guts in sacred gutters. So yes, the very first recorded Karen may have lived in Sumer, but despite it all, there's something oddly peaceful about these beginnings. The air smells of hot dust and sun-dried reeds, the soundscape a blend of rustling kilts and muttered curses. The world is waking up, and you're just one small scribal soul, trying to survive another walk to work without stepping in anything regrettable. You're not in a rush, but let's be honesty, you're never in a rush. It's hard to hurry when your sandals are made from woven reeds and tied together with something that was definitely once part of a fish. The alley spills out into a wider lane, the kind where early morning commerce mixes with early morning complaints. Before you head toward the temple quarter, it's time for the morning routine. Yes, even in ancient Sumer people had routines. You fumble around your cloth pouch for a frayed twig, your dental hygiene tool of choice. It's the Sumerian equivalent of a toothbrush probably snapped off a local shrub and chewed until the fibres split like a small angry mop. You give your teeth a gentle scrub, trying not to think too hard about the texture of last night's barley still clinging to your molars. Beside you, a woman pours out a bucket of rinse water into the street with casual flair. Some of it lands on your foot. Neither of you acknowledges it. That's just life in Ur. Back at your doorway, your cousin is shouting something about the goat having eaten the good rope, which honestly sounds like a weekly occurrence at this point. You tighten the sash around your work kilt, a rectangle of coarse fabric that's supposed to stay in place with friction and luck. So far, it's only one for two. Sumerian clothing was more about simplicity than style. Men wore kilts or wrapped skirts, often with one shoulder bare. It's practical in the heat, sure, but absolutely terrible when you need pockets. You tie a little pouch to your belt to your stylus, and clay tablets are in there along with your daily ration token, and one dried fig you keep forgetting to eat. At this point, your neighbour pokes her head out to remind you again that the communal oven's down to one decent log, and if you scribes don't contribute wood soon, the bread will taste like chewed sandal. It's not clear if that's a metaphor or a legitimate warning. And then the barley argument begins. You're barely out the door when two older men begin bickering about whose barley rations were shorted last week. They're standing near the granary, both waving what look like clay receipts, small tablets marked with cuneiform, and possibly some passive-aggressive symbols involving fish bones. You quietly back away before you're recruited as an official witness. Now, here's your mainstream historical fact. Barley was the backbone of Sumerian life. It was food, drink, and currency, all in one. You could pay taxes in barley, buy beer with it, and even settle legal disputes, assuming your barley met the correct grain length standard, of course. The fringe fact. Some records suggest barley quality could be used to insult someone. Your barley is hollow was not a compliment, it meant you were full of nothing, and probably a terrible conversationalist. You pass a woman bent over a shallow bowl of clay, scooping ashes, and mixing in watershes, making a kind of soap. Historians still argue whether Sumerians used soap daily or only for ritual purification, but judging by the smell of your armpit right now, we're leaning towards special occasions. You shuffle onward, passing the fish vendor again. He's fanning away flies with an energy that suggests he's already lost one sale to crusty eel face. His cart leans slightly, the wheels groaning with the weight of both questionable seafood and deep regret. A small boy runs past you carrying a carved stick and yelling, "Nana bless my sandals," which could be a joke or an actual prayer. Kids in Ur tended to mimic adult rituals, often turning sacred invocations into playground rhymes. Your own childhood memories involve imitating priests while pretending the family goat was a sacrifice. It didn't go well. You spot a familiar figure ahead, Melly, another junior scribe, who once spilled ink on a high priest's robe, and somehow survived. You exchange nods, the universal sign of yes, I'm awake, no, I don't want to talk. At the street corner, an older man is chanting under his breath, drawing geometric shapes in the dust with a reed. He's a practitioner of divination, trying to predict how many dead fish the river will offer today. You slow slightly, partly out of interest, partly because a donkey just blocked the path by flopping into the street like a furry roadblock. This is also when your stomach reminds you that barley mash isn't a complete meal. There's a vendor under a tattered awning roasting flatbread over coals. You consider stopping, but he's still giving you side-eye from that time you complained about the char flavour, being a bit too enthusiastic. You keep walking. Here comes your second complaint of the day. A temple clerk face scrunched like a sun-dried apricot scolds a teenage courier for misdelivering a tablet yesterday. Something about wrong quarter-divine accounting, and you better pray ananas in a forgiving mood. You quietly tiptoe around them, knowing full well that misfiled cuneiform could cause more drama than a broken floodgate. Sumerians wrote down everything, from shopping lists to tax records to break-up letters, and as you'll later discover plenty about their commutes, 2 gripes about mud, slow oxen and co-workers who brought fish to meetings. You pause for a moment in the shade of a barley silo, which is slightly cooler than the open street, but only by a whisper. There's a buzzing hum in the air, part fly swarm, part heat, shimmer, and part collective exhaustion. You lean against the wall, adjusting your sandal strap, which has now come undone 3 times. One day you tell yourself you'll invent a better way to attach shoes. Maybe leather, maybe buttons, but probably not. Innovation sounds tiring. As you finally push off the wall and resume your journey, someone yells your name from behind around the corner. You ignore it. You know who it is. It's the tax apprentice who always wants to borrow your stylus and never gives it back. Today you're not in the mood to share your tools or your limited patience. And so the routine continues. Left foot right. Foot avoid the dung nod to the baker. Try not to breathe too deeply past the tannery. Morning in Sumer smells like smoke sweat and the vague promise of paperwork. But you're getting closer now. The road curves slightly, now wide enough to accommodate 2 carts if both drivers are feeling charitable, which, let's face it, they rarely are. This is the shared artery between your quiet neighbourhood and the temple complex, and it is the lifeblood of morning commutes for scribes, potters, fishmongers, midwives, guards, and one suspicious man who always carries 3 chickens but insists he's not a chicken merchant. You squeeze past a knot of neighbours haggling over clay jugs. One woman insists her vessel was swapped for a lesser one while she was at the canal. Another swears her cousin's cousin saw a temple boy knocking them over with a broom. You duck through the dispute without making eye contact. Never make eye contact during a Sumerian jug argument. You spot a market stall owner trying to stretch goat intestine into a usable string. It's unclear what it's for: musical instrument, sausage casing, or makeshift leash, but it's enough to make you walk a little faster. The sun is already flexing, and the baked earth radiates upward like an open oven. Someone nearby mutters that the heat is a sign Enlil is angry again. Someone else says Enlil is always angry, which honestly checks out. The dusty path becomes a more structured street paved with uneven bricks grooved from years of ox cart traffic. You watch your footing. An early morning merchant forgot to shovel yesterday's donkey contributions, and no one wants that squishing between their toes. 2 boys dart past you playing some kind of tag. One of them wears a necklace strung with dried fig seeds, which might be fashion or might be a dare. You're momentarily reminded that no matter the century, kids are creative, chaotic, and likely to shout personal insults in song form. Just ahead, a familiar sound, wooden wheels squealing like disgruntled geese. You turn your head just in time to dodge an ox cart careening around the corner. The driver is standing tall, shouting a warning that comes a second too late as the cart's rear axle gives a heroic groan and tilts precariously. A basket of dates tumbles out and spills across the road. People pause. No one helps. Everyone just sort of watches in that ancient, unhurried way that says, well, that's someone else's problem now. You pick up your pace, stepping gingerly over date mush, and a surprisingly well-preserved sandal, perhaps a relic from yesterday's commute. Let's bring in your historical fact for this stretch: Sumerians engineered roads. With care, many major streets were reinforced with baked brick or crushed gravel. Though not always level or safe, these thoroughfares enabled city dwellers to navigate complex urban layouts, especially in cities like Uruk and Ur, which could house tens of thousands of people. The quirky fact: several tablets suggest that walking fines were occasionally issued, small penalties for damaging market displays, knocking over religious offerings, or accidentally stepping on a sacred line during festival preparation. One tablet even records a fine for walking with unjust haste near a ceremonial goat. Today you try to walk with just haste, not unjust. You're still hoping to reach the temple courtyard before the daily crowd. You pass a structure that smells like every stage of fermentation, at once part brewery, part vinegar, bath part public bathhouse, on a bad day. A brewer's apprentice pokes his head out, covered in foam, and looking mildly surprised by sunlight. You exchange a slow nod of mutual regret for your respective life choices. At a shaded bend in the road, two guards stand near a crude wooden post. One has a ceremonial axe tucked under his sash, the other is gnawing on a honeyed fig, and failing to look intimidating. They glance at your pouch to check for any official temple tokens, and then return to their extremely important business of arguing about sheep. You overhear one of them say, "No, I'm telling you, if a sheep circles to the left 3 times before lying down, that means good rainfall. It's the right circle that brings drought." Historians still argue whether such sheep-based omens were actual forecasting tools or just sleepy shepherd superstition. Either way, these two guards are deeply committed to their meteorological sheep theories. Farther along, a woman crouches beside a roadside altar, whispering prayers to Nanshi, goddess of justice and dreams. She places a small offering of dried fruit and crushed barley beneath a carved clay plaque, her plea for fair judgment in an upcoming grain dispute. You slow your pace in respect, but your stomach groans audibly. Her offering looks more appealing than your breakfast. As the alley narrows again, you're forced to step around a collapsed pottery crate. Shards glitter in the sunlight like angry flower petals. A cat perches nearby, watching the scene with the smug disinterest that only ancient cats could truly perfect. You duck under a hanging reed mat strung between 2 buildings for shade. The mat sags slightly and smells of old incense. You breathe it in and keep walking. Around the corner, a small temple boy runs past holding a carved signet ring, high in the air and yelling about a lost tablet. Behind him, an older scribe bellows something about divine property and scrubbing latrine bricks with your stylus. You wisely flatten yourself against the wall as they charge past dust swirling in their wake. Here's the thing. Even though it's barely past sunrise, you've already passed 3 arguments, 2 blessings, and at least 1 probable misdemeanor involving a melon stand. Still you press forward. You glance up. The temple ziggurat looms in the distance, now tiered like a wedding cake built by stubborn architects. It dominates the skyline, casting long shadows that somehow make the heat feel even heavier. You're almost there, almost. But not quite. First you have to navigate what might be the most perilous stretch of the entire journey, the market crossing, where donkeys, carts, priests, shouting vendors, and highly suspicious sheep all converge into a dance of chaos and dust. And you just want to get to your little desk and scratch pictograms into a tablet in peace. But peace is for the gods. For now, you square your shoulders, grip your stylus pouch and wade into the noise. You take a deep breath and immediately regret it. The market crossing smells like roasted onions, sweaty leather, and something tangy that may have once been fish but has since moved on to another stage of being entirely. Still, you press forward, eyes alert and sandals cautious. The road here has widened into what counts as a thoroughfare, though it's still mostly uneven earth, with the occasional trampled reed mat. This is where everyone converges. Temple workers, basket merchants, scribes, livestock herders, spice dealers, even the occasional astrologer waving at the sky like it owes them money. You pause at the edge of the crossing, where a trio of oxen have decided they're not moving anymore. They stand like boulders with legs chewing cud and staring into the middle distance, philosophically unmoved by human urgency. Their driver stands off to the side, arms crossed, debating loudly with the air. This is not unusual. You dodge past the oxen by squeezing between two clay amphorae stacked high on a cart. A man shouts at you for nearly toppling his cargo. You mutter an apology and trip on a wooden beam that shouldn't be there. A group of children laugh. You pretend it didn't happen. Now you're in the heart of it. A priestess glides by in dyed linen robes, a sharp contrast to your dust-smeared tunic. She smells like frankincense and authority. You give her a respectful nod, and she doesn't acknowledge you in the slightest. That's probably fair. To your left, a fish vendor is yelling prices at a weaver who is pretending not to hear. To your right, someone is selling dyed wool in hues you didn't know could exist without divine intervention. Ahead, a street performer balances a bowl on his head while reciting the story of the Great Flood. The bowl wobbles precariously. You don't stay to see if it falls. And right in the centre of it, all the ferry dock. The Tigris in all its murky glory glints under the rising sun like a sullen mirror. Ferries bob at the bank, waiting to shuttle workers across to the temple quarter. These are not elegant vessels. They're little more than wide rafts patched together from wood tar, and the optimism of men who never learned to swim. You approach the dock clay token in hand. A ferryman eyes you sceptically, probably because you once corrected his pronunciation of Ereshkigal during a lunar festival. Petty rivalries never die here. They just change form, like overcooked lentils. Still he waves you aboard. The raft rocks as you step on, and you plant your feet like a temple column. Around you, a few other scribes shuffle into position, clutching their own tablets, satchels, and half-eaten flatbreads. One woman nods politely. Another is asleep, standing up. It's unclear if she's commuting or just deeply existential. Now let's float into your mainstream fact of the moment. River transport in ancient Mesopotamia was essential. Roads were dusty, narrow, and often filled with livestock. The Tigris and Euphrates were the highways of the time used to carry goods, messages, and people from one end of a city to another, or between entire city-states. And now for the quirky tidbit, some surviving texts describe ferry brawls. Yes, actual fistfights on floating rafts. One tablet recounts an incident involving a baker, a priest, and an argument about seat priority that ended with someone in the river. Naturally, the baker blamed divine interference. Your raft creaks along. The current is lazy this morning, more sludge than stream. The ferryman poles you across using a long branch that may have once been a tree of some importance. Midway across, he begins humming something that sounds like a morning chant, but might also be a love song to lentils. It's hard to tell in this culture. One of your fellow passengers begins telling a story about a temple clerk who tried to impress the goddess Inanna by carving her likeness into a melon. He reportedly got fired. The story ends with a joke about sacred fruit, and nobody laughs, but everyone quietly appreciates the effort. The ferry bumps against the opposite bank, and you all disembark like weary pilgrims arriving at a shrine of paperwork. The dock is damp and uneven, lined with reed baskets that may or may not still contain live eels. You step over one cautiously. The city embankment here is steeper lined with half-buried pottery and the remnants of last week's festival decorations, faded streamers, and a smashed clay bull effigy. You climb slowly, knees protesting sandals slipping slightly, on the slick slope. A dog watches from the top. You nod. The dog does not. At the summit, a new wave of noise greets you. Carts rumble, scribes argue, and temple acolytes chant in unison as they carry offering trays through the main gate. Somewhere nearby, a flute player is attempting the hymn of Enki with enthusiasm but questionable accuracy. This is where the real gridlock begins. The road narrows again at a choke point between two merchant booths. One is selling medicinal herbs dried, crumbled and wrapped in palm leaves. The other is a meat stall with a rack of something unidentifiable hanging beside a bowl of what you sincerely hope is stew. The smell suggests otherwise. You shuffle past the crowd, squeezed between a man carrying an amphora on each shoulder and a priest barking at a boy who's dropped a basket of ritual beads. The clatter is deafening, and the priest's glare could wither crops. Here's your open scholarly debate phrase for this ride. Historians still argue whether this part of the temple district was used exclusively for sacred purposes, or if parts of it were leased to vendors for daily trade. Based on the current chaos, you're leaning toward both somehow. The ziggurat now looms just 2 alleys away, casting a long shadow across the plaza. You can already hear the morning gong echoing through its hollow corridors, summoning scribes and stewards alike. You touch your pouch nervously, tablet, stylus, onion. Still there. As you round the last bend, a boy trips and nearly crashes into you. He mumbles an apology and scurries off. You barely notice. You're focused on the looming gate ahead and the knowledge that you've made it halfway to your work post without losing a sandal, your dignity, or your ration token. That's a win. You edge toward the bottleneck known lovingly, sarcastically, really as Tigris Street. This narrow stretch hugs the riverbank, and at this hour turns into the Mesopotamian equivalent of rush hour chaos. Not the frantic honking kind. This is more of a sleepy, resigned cluster of carts, oxen, pedestrians, and a goat trying to eat a tax scroll. The stone pavers underfoot are slick with river mist and donkey droppings. You step carefully, sidestepping a puddle that might be water, but also might be some kind of oil or ancient soup. There's no way to be sure. A woman ahead of you slips slightly, catches herself with a laugh, and goes right back to balancing a tray of hot lentil cakes on her head. Behind you, a man mutters curses under his breath, something about broken axles and the gods having a personal grudge. You resist the urge to agree out loud. Too early to start theological debates with strangers. You finally reach the worst of it. 3 ox carts are wedged in the street nose to tail. One driver insists he had the right of way because he was transporting fish for the temple kitchen. The other claims he's carrying ceremonial clay bricks for a priest's courtyard and therefore has divine priority. The third simply sighs and feeds a crust of bread to his ox. The ox appears to appreciate his calm. You consider crawling under one of the carts, but then notice a toddler doing exactly that. He emerges victorious, holding what looks like a crushed fig and the jawbone of a small animal. He waves at you. You wave back because there's no rule against it. Let's take a breather for a historical fact. Urban congestion was a real issue in ancient Sumer. With city populations in the tens of thousands and streets often built for foot traffic, and animals, not mass movement bottlenecks like this, weren't rare. Scholars believe some roads were even subject to rudimentary traffic control, likely enforced by temple guards or barked warnings from elderly vendors. Now your fringe tidbit, a few tablets from Lagash, mention a clay amulet supposedly worn by cart pullers that warded off delays. It's unclear whether this was spiritual protection or a passive-aggressive signal to get out of the way. As you wait, the scene grows more absurd. A priest appears mid-level, judging by the embroidery on his robe, and immediately starts barking orders at everyone. He claims the sacred incense delivery is behind schedule, and this is offending the goddess. One cart driver mutters that maybe the goddess should walk next time. You pretend not to hear it. To your left, a vendor has taken advantage of the standstill by launching into a sales pitch. His hawking copper stylus is blessed by Enki's own beard. You don't need one, but you admire the hustle. The smell in this section of the street is particularly vivid. There's the tang of river silt, the sweet burn of temple incense wafting from up ahead, and the sharp, nose-tingling funk of fresh dung baking in the sun. It's a sensory buffet. Eventually, the jam untangles itself. The fish cart pulls aside the brick driver, mutters about repairs, and you finally move forward. The relief is immediate, like escaping a very polite riot. You pass under a low-hanging banner made of dyed reeds. It flaps gently in the breeze and reads approximately, "May the goddess Ninhursag bless this street with fewer delays." A lovely sentiment, completely ignored. You walk a little faster now, your legs adjusting to the rhythm again. You dodge a cluster of pottery shards. Someone tried to sweep into a corner. A flute player perched on a step nods at you and plays a few solemn notes. They seem improvised. You nod back anyway. There's a brief stretch of quiet, just a few buildings lining the road. One is a beadmaker's shop, its window filled with rows of glinting blue lapis beads. You pause for a moment to admire the shine. Your pay would cover exactly 2 of them if you skipped lunch for a week. Maybe someday. Across from it, a small shrine tucked into an alcove. A few passers-by stop to touch the edge of the altar and whisper a request. You step aside as an older woman leaves an offering of dried dates and a tiny carved rabbit. You wonder who she's praying for, or maybe she's asking for smoother traffic. Now's the moment to glance ahead. You're approaching the main plaza, where the temple's outer gate stands. The crowd thickens again. This time, it's not traffic, it's procession. A religious festival is being prepared and you've arrived right as the ceremonial parade is forming. Of course. A cluster of musicians test drums with dull thumps. Young temple servants hustle back and forth, carrying wreaths, banners, and baskets of dyed wool. A goat stands in the centre extremely confused, wearing a necklace of flowers, and looking like it would rather be literally anywhere else. People begin to clear a path as the main performers assemble. You realise you're not getting through this area anytime soon. You back away slightly and lean against a column watching the preparation unfold. Mainstream historical note: incoming religious parades were common in Sumerian cities, often conducted at dawn or dusk to avoid the brutal midday heat. They featured music, dance, animal symbols, and offerings carried through the streets toward a temple altar. Here's the quirky bit: one famous cuneiform tablet describes a parade goat that panicked mid-procession and bolted through the crowd, overturning an offering tray and crashing headfirst into a ziggurat wall. Miraculously, it survived and was later given honorary sanctuary in the temple garden. The musicians begin playing slow rhythmic beats paired with chanting. You listen for a moment. It's oddly calming in the way only structured chaos can be. Around you, people sway gently or whisper blessings. A child behind you keeps trying to hum along badly. His mother gently hushes him and offers a fig, and you close your eyes briefly. The heat presses down the drum beat's echo, and for a moment the commute fades into something else: ritual rhythm repetition. You're not just walking to work, you're participating in the endless flow of ancient city life, stuck in traffic with the gods. Then someone nearby sneezes loudly and you're jolted back to reality. The procession finally moves forward. The goat hesitates, then follows. You wait a beat, then slip into the wake of the parade, hoping to draft behind it like a very quiet chariot racer. And just like that, you're moving again. You trail behind the procession with measured steps, not wanting to draw attention, but also hoping the crowd parts enough for you to slip through. The musicians keep a steady beat ahead, and the goat, still bedecked in its necklace of wilting flowers, has decided it's finally okay with its role in the ritual. It walks like it owns the street now. You respect that. The road forks up ahead. One way leads toward the temple's back courtyard, where scribes like you work the other snakes toward the larger ziggurat plaza, where the public sacrifices and big ceremonies happen. You veer right away from the fanfare and find yourself on a quieter path again. And now, the part you almost look forward to, the small talk. Yes, even in ancient Sumer commuters shared gripes, gossip, and the occasional unsolicited medical advice. You pass a potter who's sitting on his front step, feet coated in clay, muttering about how his apprentice shattered 4 jars and blamed a moon spirit. You nod politely and keep walking. He doesn't notice he's already mid-rant. A few steps later, you fall into step beside another scribe, one of the junior temple assistants. You don't know his name, but you've shared space near the same work table long enough that your elbows have a rapport. He gives you a bleary nod and opens with the classic greeting, "Dusty morning." You respond in kind and loud cuts. This is the rhythm of the day. You exchange a few more words about the weather, Utus already overdoing it, the upcoming tax tally there 3 days late on the lamb count, and the latest palace rumour, someone's cousin said the king lost a game of to a visiting merchant and flipped the whole board. Mainstream historical moment. Sumerians loved a good board game. The royal game of Uran, early ancestor of backgammon, was immensely popular. It involved strategy, luck, and likely a fair share of gloating. Archaeologists even found carved game boards in tombs suggesting the afterlife had time for tournaments. And here's your quirky tidbit: at least one recovered tablet includes a comedic poem written in cuneiform about a man so obsessed with winning the game that he ignored his wife, his goats and the sun itself. The last line jokes that Enki himself would never challenge this man. Your walking companion scratches his beard thoughtfully. Do you think Enlil likes music? You're not sure where this is going, you say cautiously, maybe when he's not throwing storms at people. He nods like that was a profound insight and mutters something about tuning his lyre. You suspect he's planning to sneak off later to practice near the canals. You decide not to tattle. You pass under a narrow archway, formed by two buildings, leaning affectionately toward each other. A woman is sweeping the roof above you, letting bits of straw and dirt rain down. She shouts, "Clear below, far too late," and a wad of reed chaff plops onto your shoulder. You brush it off with a sigh. Ancient Sumer, where every commute includes light debris. The conversation ahead has shifted again. Two older men are discussing omens. One claims he dreamt of a fish flying through the sky, which according to him means an early harvest. The other insists that's a sign of disease among livestock. They argue gently, like they've had this conversation every week for a decade. Historians still argue whether Sumerian dream interpretation was considered an actual science or more of a priestly pastime. The tablets say both. Some dreams were catalogued by temple officials in sprawling lists of if this then that. Others were handled informally passed down like folk wisdom. Either way, everyone had an opinion about flying fish. You chuckle to yourself and almost trip over a sleeping dog stretched across the road. The dog does not move. You step around him respectfully. You're getting close now, just a few more turns, and you'll see the outer wall of the temple's scribal quarter. You pass a wall etched with faded carvings, prayers, love poems, someone's attempt at a fish sketch that looks more like a spoon with fins. The wall serves as a kind of ancient message board, updated only when someone feels bold or bored enough to add to it. You pause to read a fresh inscription. To the scribe who stole my figme, your stylus snap in both hands, a classic. To your right, you hear a merchant hawking blessed ash from last week's fire ritual. He's got a small crowd all nodding gravely as he waves a bowl and explains how a pinch sprinkled in the doorway keeps your goats from sneezing. One woman buys 2 scoops. You don't ask. Up ahead, a woman with a basket of onions offers a sharp grin and even sharper prices. You glance at her wares and consider whether you need one for lunch, but your pouch is already heavy, and temple onions tend to mysteriously vanish during prayer breaks. You pass a temple guard who's attempting to fix his sandal strap by chewing the end and tying it into a knot. You give him a sympathetic look. He returns it exhausted. Now here's a little linguistic nugget. Many Sumerian personal names doubled as conversation starters. Yours means something close to he who records the earth's breath. People joke that it means you fall asleep while writing weather reports. You don't correct them. It's not entirely inaccurate. You finally reach a shady bend in the path where a large fig tree stretches its roots like lazy fingers across the road. Someone's placed a cracked water jug under its branches, half filled for thirsty travellers. You stop, lift it carefully, and take a sip. The water's warm and slightly dusty but clean. You nod a silent thank you to whoever left it. Then you move on. You're still not quite at the scribal compound, but the road's familiar. Know every cracked stone and temple carving etched into your routine. You feel the weight of the clay tablet in your pouch, the comforting scratch of your reed stylus tucked in its loop. You've talked your way through omens and onions, dodged dreamers and goats, and somehow made it here without getting roped into altar cleaning duty. The temple wall comes into view again, its bricks sun-baked and imposing the high archway, casting a long shadow like a sundial measuring your lateness. You pause, not because you're tired though you are, but because you know what comes next. And somehow you're looking forward to it. The temple wall rises beside you, like a heat-trapped cliff-layered brick, baked by centuries of sun, and etched faintly with faded marks from long-dead builders. You trail your fingers along it briefly. The surface is rough and strangely warm, radiating back the sun's power like a passive-aggressive oven. But your gaze shifts downward, not out of reverence, but because this next part of the commute has hazards. You're entering the section of the road, affectionately referred to as the gauntlet. Not officially, of course, but that's what everyone calls it. Why? Because this stretch is home to two things, half forgotten: roadside shrines and animals, with absolutely no sense of traffic etiquette. To your right, a small shrine stands partially sunken into the corner between buildings. It's dedicated to Ninazu, god of healing and snakes. Yes, both. There's a carved cobra curling up the base of the altar, and someone's left a fresh offering of goat's milk, and oddly a bit of honeycomb. As you pass it, you mutter a half prayer, just in case. Ninazu isn't particularly high in your personal pantheon, but with your luck, ignoring a snake god is how you end up finding one in your satchel. Beside the shrine sits an elderly man with a reed flute and no shirt. He plays slow wandering notes while watching the street with the disinterested stare of someone who has truly seen it all. Next to him, a small goat wearing what looks like an old priest's headband. You decide not to ask. You continue cautiously. The cobblestones here are uneven and occasionally unexpectedly wet. Somewhere up ahead a drainage ditch burbles. You squint. Yes, there it is. The classic Sumerian urban feature an open stone-lined trench full of water, or something pretending to be water. You step over it with grace, only to nearly trip on a tangle of discarded reeds someone left in the road. You recover with what you hope looks like a natural skip. A child nearby giggles. You keep your head high and pretend you meant to do that. Mainstream historical note. Sumerian cities, including and Uruk, featured public sanitation systems, though rudimentary by modern standards. These included open drains and covered channels to divert wastewater. While advanced for their time, the system's effectiveness varied. Now, for your quirky fact, some temples stationed minor deities or spirit effigies near drains and culverts, supposedly to protect against disease spirits or wandering filth demons. One tablet even warns that ignoring a drainside shrine could lead to a curse of endless itching. You pick up the pace, but the real danger isn't the filth, it's the animals. A cluster of pigs has taken over the next bend in the path. They snort with vague menace sprawled out in a patch of shade, like royalty. One of them eyes you. You inch around, heart pounding slightly. Never underestimate a bored pig. You once saw one steal a sandal off a priest's foot and run 3 streets before giving it back well half of it. As you round the bend, the scent of incense briefly returns, sweet cloying, a bit burnt. There's another shrine up ahead. This one is to Ninkasi, goddess of beer, and it's much more festive. Someone's placed a tiny mug beside her stone bust and a bowl of barley mash bubbles gently in the morning sun. The statue's carved lips seem to smile, or maybe you're imagining that. Either way, you nod your thanks. And then suddenly you halt. Right in your path, curled up beneath a slab of broken wall, is a snake. A small one, but a snake nonetheless. Its body is coiled neatly like a decorative reed rope, its eyes half-lidded in drowsy contempt. You stare at it. It stares back. No one moves. Historians still debate the symbolic role of snakes in Sumerian daily life. Some believe they were seen as symbols of protection and rebirth. Others think people just gave them space out of sheer practical fear. You fall somewhere in the middle. After a tense pause, the snake flicks its tongue, uncurls lazily, and slithers off into the reeds. You breathe again. This commute is testing you today. You pass a low platform with a few jars lined up neatly, some broken, some whole. They're part of a public offering system where people deposit surplus goods for the temple or the needy. Today the contents include 3 withered onions, 1 unlabeled clay figurine, and a stick with feathers glued to it. You're unsure who that's for, but you appreciate the effort. Just ahead you hear the soft murmur of prayer. A woman kneels beside a burnt-out incense pile, whispering to herself. Her hands move rhythmically, shaping a tiny clay tablet as she prays. Some worshippers make offerings. Others craft tokens, charms, or even complaints disguised as hymns. You quietly step around her and nearly trip over, of course, another goat. This one is tied to a post near a family's front stoop. It watches you pass with the same judgmental look your aunt gives you when you're late for dinner. You offer a respectful nod. The goat blinks unimpressed. Ahead you spot a man painting fresh symbols onto a clay tablet nailed to his door. It reads roughly, "Peace within." Barley secured. Wife still mad. You snort softly. That's the most relatable message you've seen all morning. But the peace doesn't last. A young boy runs past screaming about someone stealing his sandaled chicken. You do a double take. Sandaled. Chicken! You don't ask. Some things are best left as mysteries. You finally reach the last major shrine before the temple wall turns sharply into the rear courtyard. It's to Inanna goddess of love, war, and well everything. Her shrine is adorned with bead shells and an impressively carved reed heart. A musician plays nearby, singing a lilting hymn that includes lines about tears on the road and feet heavy with dust. You feel that deeply. This final stop is where many commuters offer a last prayer before entering temple grounds. You pause a moment, not to pray exactly, but just to breathe. The wind shifts slightly. The incense smoke curls toward the east. Somewhere nearby, a bell chimes softly. You close your eyes, and when you open them, you take one more step forward. You're almost there now. You round the final corner with the slow confidence of someone who has survived most of the city's morning chaos and still has both sandals attached mostly. Your right one is fraying at the toe, and it keeps flipping up tiny sprays of dust with every other step. It's fine. It only has to last until lunch. Just ahead you see the modest archway that marks the entrance to the outer temple courtyard, the scribe's gate to be exact. It's not as grand as the main entrance used by priests and ceremonial guests, but it has its charm, a pair of faded lion carvings on either side, their faces more curious than menacing, and a roof of clay tiles that creak ominously whenever pigeons land on them. You reach for the small pouch tied at your waist and draw out the day's essentials. Your clay ID token, a lump of soft tablet clay, your reed stylus still intact, and of course, the emergency onion. Not for writing, just a backup snack or bribe if needed. You learned that lesson during the great stylus theft incident last month. You approach the gate and the guard on duty gives you a familiar nod. He's older with a limp that he claims is from arguing with a bull too long. No one knows what that means, but no one questions him. You hand him your token. He squints at it, then at you, then waves you through with the kind of weary benevolence that says, "Go on, I'm not paid enough to care." And then you're in. The temple courtyard opens up before you, a spacious expanse of smoothed earth surrounded by low stone buildings. In the centre, a shaded awning stretches over a row of benches where junior scribes are already assembling their materials. There's the steady tap-tap of styluses against clay, the occasional yawn, and one man softly reciting multiplication tables under his breath, like a protective charm. Before you head to your bench, you find a quiet corner and sit briefly. The transition from outside chaos to temple calm is always jarring, like stepping into a different dimension where everything smells less like goat and more like burnt cedar. You unwrap your stylus and test its point on a scrap of practice clay. It's sharp, smooth, perfect. You allow yourself a little smile. For all the mess and madness of the commute this moment, the press of reed into clay, the clean slice of symbol across a soft surface makes it worthwhile. Let's hit our historical checkpoint. Sumerian scribes carried their tools with them, daily usually, a reed stylus, a pouch of prepared clay, and a damp cloth for smoothing tablet surfaces. Some even had portable wax boards for drafts, though these were less common in temple work. And the quirky gem, one scrubble tablet contains an etched doodle of what appears to be a donkey wearing a priest's hat. Whether it was satire boredom or an early attempt at comic relief, we may never know, but clearly even ancient office workers needed to blow off steam. As you sit in the corner adjusting your robe and checking your materials, a familiar face joins you to another scribe. He always smells vaguely of ink and freshly ground barley. He plops down beside you with a theatrical sigh. "Did you hear," he says without preamble, "that erudite scribes have switched to left-hand style?" You blink. Left-hand style. He nods gravely, supposedly speeds up the lunar tax forms. Less smudge. You both stare into the middle distance for a moment considering this. Then you shrug. We're still trying to get barley columns to align. Itu laughs. True. That's the thing about this place, quiet as it is. The courtyard has a pulse. Scribes share ideas, gossip snacks, and occasionally passive-aggressive edits to each other's work. One time someone rewrote a colleague's tablet to say, "I am a worm of ink," and left it on the altar. It got past 3 levels of priestly review before anyone noticed. You reach into your bag for the tablet you smoothed last night. It's slightly cracked on one corner, but still usable. You run your fingers along its surface, thinking about today's task inventorying, the latest grain shipment, and updating temple staff rosters. Glamorous work, truly. But it's better than chasing pigs out of the holy garden, which is what one poor clerk got assigned last week after forgetting a decimal. There's a knock of sandals behind you. You glance up to see a novice acolyte holding a wooden tray stacked with raw clay blocks. He offers one to you with both hands respectfully. You take it, bow your head slightly, and he disappears, just as silently. You begin shaping it with your palm, working out the air bubbles, smoothing the surface with the edge of your thumb. It's meditative, almost hypnotic. The rhythmic press and pull the soft resistance of the clay, the warm morning breeze fluttering the edge of your robe. And in this moment you remember something simple. This was the part you actually enjoyed. The commute may have been long, dusty, chaotic, and filled with oddly judgmental livestock, but the reward is right here. A square of clay, a reed, a blank space to fill with symbols that outlive your footsteps. You pause, glance at the courtyard again. Over in the far corner, a young scribe is practicing glyphs for ox house and rain. His lines are crooked but enthusiastic. Another is sketching a rough outline of a city map. Someone else, perhaps ambitiously, is trying to draft a love poem in formal Sumerian. The word he uses for your smile also means river eel. You choose not to correct him. Then comes a voice. You. New message from the inner temple. You look up. A priest stands at the edge of the courtyard, flanked by 2 assistants. He's holding a tightly wrapped clay cylinder, sealed official and ominous. You rise slowly. Yes, honoured one. He hands you the message with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Deliver this to the chief scribe immediately. You bow, of course. And just like that, your commute continues. Not across the city now, but deeper into the labyrinth of temple corridors, record halls, and divine bureaucracy. You tighten your sash, tuck your stylus securely, and walk toward the doorway that leads to the next leg of your day. The moment you step through the temple doorway, the air changes. It's cooler here, thicker, somehow scented with crushed herbs, damp clay, and the faint aroma of burnt myrrh. Sounds are different too. Outside the city roared with life. In here, everything is hushed, like the walls themselves are listening. You clutch the sealed clay message tighter and step carefully across the polished brick floor. A novice brushes past with a tablet tray and mumbles a blessing that sounds more like a sneeze. You return it with a respectful nod. Everyone moves with intention inside the temple, no wandering, no side-eye at the walls. The gods are watching, or at least that's what the priests like to remind you. The message you're holding isn't heavy, but it radiates importance. The clay cylinder is sealed with a stamp impression, likely from the high priest's own ring. That means the message is either A, a sacred directive from the divine altar, or B, another rant about grain storage and improperly counted goats. Odds are even. Your sandals slap softly against the floor as you navigate the outer corridor. Along one wall, intricate murals tell the stories of the gods. Enki rising from the waters, Inanna descending into the underworld Dumuzid. Well-being Dumuzid, which usually involves crying or running from something. You pass a prayer chamber, where a single priest is chanting over a bowl of smoke. The air shimmers. A chicken watches from the corner, eerily still. You don't ask. Then comes the scribe's corridora, narrower passage, lined with niches, benches, and writing stations. This is your world, and the scribe's snack corner just ahead. You make a quick detour. The alcove is small shaded and mostly ignored by the temple elite, but here beneath a carved lintel of leaping gazelles sits a familiar, woven basket crammed with various edible odds and ends, dried fish split, lentil cakes, honeyed dates, and a jug of diluted beer resting in a shallow bowl of water to keep it cool. You glance around, no one's watching, and reach for a flatbread. It's dry, slightly burnt around the edges, and absolutely perfect. You sit on a bench tearing off a piece with your teeth feeling the texture crumble like ancient paperwork in your mouth. It's the kind of snack that reminds you why clay tablets are chew-resistant. And here comes your mainstream historical gem. Sumerians regularly consumed a diet rich in barley, onions, dates, legumes, and fish from the rivers. While their food may sound bland, archaeological evidence suggests a surprising range of culinary practices, including spices like garlic, mustard seed, and coriander. Now, for the quirky twist, one preserved tablet includes what might be the world's first cookbook. It lists recipes for stews and breads, with helpful tips like boil until it is pleasing and add beer generously, as the gods do. You chase the flatbread with a sip of warm, weak beer. It's more porridge than drink, but it does the job. You sigh, lean your head back, and take a moment to exist. A rustle behind you, Itu again. He slides onto the bench, chewing something suspiciously fig-like. You get roped into a delivery too. You hold up the clay cylinder from the inner temple. Oof, he says, mock sympathetically. Hope it's not about that new goat census. I heard one of them try to headbutt a statue of Enlil. They're saying it's a divine protest. You raise an eyebrow. Divine or just poorly trained? He shrugs, eyes twinkling. Depends on who's writing the tablet. You both share a quiet laugh. Then he rises, dusts crumbs off his robe, and says, "Good luck. If it is the goat thing, remember, don't make eye contact with the high priest unless you want to be reassigned to brick inventory." Noted. With the last of the bread tucked into your cheek like a squirrel saving snacks for later, you rise and continue down the corridor. The message cylinder warms in your hand, probably from your own nerves. You pass familiar faces, the elder scribe with the hunched back and ink-stained fingers, the young girl learning to sharpen her stylus without snapping it, the twins who always whisper in unison and probably know your deepest secrets. And then at last the chief scribe's door. It's larger than yours, carved with a stylized tablet motif and painted with thick lines of black and red. A curtain of beads tinkles softly in the breeze. You knock once. A grunt, enter. You push through and bow respectfully. The chief scribe sits cross-legged on a reed mat, surrounded by half-dried tablets, ink pots, and the unmistakable smell of stress. His robe is wrinkled, his hair streaked with clay dust, and his eyebrows are attempting to unionize against his forehead. You offer the message. He takes it with a grunt, studies the seal, then groans. Goat thing. Goat thing. He cracks the seal, unrolls the tablet carefully, and reads. His brow furrows. He chuckles darkly. They want a second opinion. About the goat. No, about the interpretation of the goat's behaviour. You blink. Like, was it divine anger or just indigestion? He nods grimly. Exactly. You want to say something, but there is truly no appropriate response. He waves you off. Go. Write something useful today, and for the god's sake, stay out of the animal yard. You nod. Yes, honoured one. As you step back into the corridor, you can't help but marvel at the fact that yes, the temple elite really are spending this morning debating whether a goat's bad mood had cosmic implications. You shake your head slowly and return to your writing alcove. The sun is higher now, the air thicker. Somewhere outside bells are chiming, but in here it's just you, your stylus, and your next clay tablet. You sit, you flatten the clay, you exhale. And then you write, complaint regarding the eastward cart delay. Cited reasons, pig blockade, snake omen, and unsanctioned fig theft. Just another day. You're finally settled into your corner stylus in hand, clay tablets softened and smoothed, like a miniature sun-baked pillow. The clamour of your morning commute feels like a distant fever dream. No donkeys' drums, snake gods and sandal-stealing pigs, all fading into the background hum of temple life. Until, of course, someone sneezes explosively from the other side of the courtyard and a flock of pigeons take off from the roof in a flurry of indignation. You flinch, nearly scoring a line through the wrong name in the grain receipt you were just drafting. You mutter something very unpoetic under your breath and begin again. The problem is now your tablet has a smudge, and your stylus just bent slightly at the tip. Wonderful. You fish out your backup stylus, it's shorter, gnawed on the end-long story, and not your favourite, but it'll do. You breathe in deeply, straighten your posture, and prepare to rewrite the name of the village that somehow always sends the wrong number of geese. But before you can start, you hear it, the shuffle of sandals and the telltale jangle of bronze. The tax apprentice is approaching. You pretend you don't see him. He clears his throat anyway. Scribe of the third tier. You sigh. Yes, I have a discrepancy token for you. Of course he does. He always does. The boy is about 12, puffed up with temple pride, and utterly addicted to issuing correction requests. He drops a token on your bench with great ceremony. It's a small clay disc stamped with the sign, for error in tallied offerings. His favourite. What now, you ask, already dreading the answer. Yesterday's figures for barley from Hamu village off by 3 shekels. Hamu village hasn't delivered barley in a week. He grins. Exactly, that's the problem. You resist the urge to bury your face in your hands, and instead just nod. Fine. Noted. Ill revise. He bows dramatically and departs. You stare after him, wondering how someone so small can wield so much administrative havoc. Here's your historical fact to savour, while you slowly lose your will to live. Sumerian bureaucracy was astonishingly meticulous. From temple inventories to livestock tallies, nearly every transaction was recorded. Scribes used standardised symbols and measurement systems to track goods, offerings, land ownership, and even personal disputes. The quirky gem. Some tablets were dedicated entirely to complaints, employees lamenting lazy co-workers, merchants arguing about dock space, even parents begging temple teachers to stop assigning so much homework. One such tablet begins with the elegant phrase, "My neighbour's son is full of noise and no letters." You look down at your current tablet and wonder whether your scribbles will someday be read by future scholars trying to guess how irritated you were at that moment. Pretty irritated, probably. Your stylus pressure says it all. You turn your attention back to the grain records. Column after column of symbols, field sizes, yield estimates, labour accounts, whether the temple oxen actually showed up to plough. It's not glamorous work, but it's important. At least that's what they keep telling you. You're about halfway through transcribing a tablet when you hear a clatter in the courtyard. Someone's dropped a jug. Again. A minor scribe runs past, tripping slightly as he goes. Meeting, he calls out breathless. Scribe summoned. Of course we are, you think. It's been nearly 3 days since the last emergency meeting. You pack up your supplies carefully because the ink jar from yesterday still smells like disappointment, and follow the tide of robes and sandals, heading toward the central meeting chamber. You find your usual spot, 3rd row, next to a pillar that has the word "Sigh" carved into it in very small, very familiar handwriting. Yours. The chief scribe stands at the front, arms crossed, looking like he aged 12 years since breakfast. "We have an issue," he says. There's a collective inhale. The gate record tablet was overwritten with a grocery list. A ripple of amusement runs through the chamber. Someone actually chuckles. This is not funny, the chief scribe says, because the grocery list was written in festival script, which is sacred. And now we don't know if we're missing goats or onions. You cough quietly. He too leans in. I bet it was the guy who eats his stylus. He keeps mixing up the oil registers and the hymn requests. The chief scribe sighs, pinching the bridge of his nose. We're assigning emergency recopies. Yuhi points straight at you'll transcribe the last 3 days of courtyard records. From memory? Your eyes widen. Memory. He nods. You were there, weren't you? Technically, yes. Spiritually. You were thinking about whether onions are a vegetable or a fruit. You nod reluctantly. You all shuffle out again. The courtyard returns to its usual rhythm, scribes, tapping away messengers, rushing in and out, a chicken trying to climb a bench like it's applying for a promotion. You sit back down and start your mental reconstruction. You remember the older priest slipping on wet clay, the girl who claimed someone stole her incense voucher, the 3 traders from Kish who argued about who had the prettier jar. You start writing it all down, stylus flying. And here's your only Insuma moment for the day. As you finish the line about the jar dispute, a pigeon drops something unholy onto your tablet. Dead center. You pause, you inhale, you exhale, and you wipe it off with the corner of your robe like a professional. As you continue writing, you realize something oddly comforting. This is your commute too. Not just the walk through mud and markets, but this, the flow of people, paperwork, pigeons, and petty problems. The rhythm of daily absurdity. The strange, beautiful monotony of temple life. You finish the revised tablet. You blow gently on it to help it dry, and you place it in the tray marked completed, possibly correct. You lean back, stretch your fingers, reach into your pouch, and finally bite into that emergency onion. It's terrible, but it's yours. You've officially hit that part of the day where time stops behaving. The sun outside climbs higher, but inside the temple scriptorium, it's always just beige. Light filters through reed blinds and bounces off clay walls in a sleepy, dusty glow. The scent of drying tablets mixes with faint ink fumes and the occasional burnt lentil from someone's attempt at cooking behind the storage room. You set down your stylus with a soft clack and stretch your shoulders. Your spine crackles like a woven basket under too much barley. You glance around. Others are doing the same, taking small breaks, cracking joints, chewing thoughtfully on dried fish or leftover bread crusts. One scribe near the window is absent-mindedly sketching what looks like a duck with wings far too muscular. It's probably an inside joke. Then a glimmer of satisfaction. You reach into your document pouch and pull out the tablet you wrote yesterday, your own personal piece of scribal frustration, a log of your daily commute complaints. Yes, they made you write it. And yes, it's probably your finest work. The title, Tablets of Suffering, Volnai My Feet and Other Victims. You flip it over in your hands, admiring your craftsmanship. Clean indentations, well-balanced lines, only one ink blot and impressive feat, given the heat and your mood at the time. The content is equally dramatic complaints about oxen congestion, a goat that tried to follow you into the latrine, and that suspicious fish vendor who insists on making eye contact while chopping heads. Time for your mainstream historical moment. Many cuneiform tablets from Sumer contain surprisingly mundane topics. While some were sacred hymns or legal codes, many were just notes, logs of livestock, personal letters, inventories of temple kitchen oil, even rants. And now for the quirky, there exists a tablet in the British Museum that is essentially a complaint letter from a copper buyer to a copper seller. It includes such timeless gems as "You treated me with contempt, and I shall use the king's name to shame you," proof that ancient customer service had its own dark magic. You flip your tablet back over and contemplate where to file it. You could leave it in the general tray, but it'll likely get repurposed for shopping lists, or worse, to prop up the unsteady table near the incense room. So instead you mark the back with a little smiley face. Not an official glyph, of course, just something recognizable between you and Titu. As if summoned by thought, Itu appears beside you, balancing a clay mug filled with something vaguely fruity. He nods toward your tablet. Is that the complaint tablet? You grin, the very one. He leans in, reads a few lines and chuckles. The chicken rode the ox through the alley, and I had to swear it wasn't mine. This is good work. Honest, raw. I write what I live, you reply with theatrical pride. He too sips from his mug. I just wrote 4 lines about roof repairs and a rat that chewed through the herb storage. Poetry, you nod. A messenger interrupts, appearing in the courtyard, like a sandstorm in sandals. His breathless, sweaty, and clenching a fistful of tokens and scraps. New postings, he yells. Work assignments. Groans echo from every corner. You and E2 exchange looks, then slowly rise and shuffle to the main posting board. It's a wooden frame with strips of clay tiles dangling from twine. Names, tasks, places, all carved hastily by someone with a deadline and a grudge. You squint. Your name is there. Scribe. Midday post. Outer wall records. Tablet form 32B. E2 scans the board, and I've got pig counts again. Why is it always pigs? You shrug. The pigs trust you. No one trusts me, he mutters. You collect your assignment token and head toward the outer gate of the temple. The midday post means recording the names of workers, counting how many times they go in and out, and updating tablets with deliveries, grains, pots, beer, the occasional sheep with an attitude problem. But first you need a fresh tablet. You duck into the storeroom where racks of clay blocks wait like sleeping bricks. You select a medium-sized one perfect for today's dull but vital entries and dampen it slightly in the basin. The surface softens just enough to take a stylus, and you wrap it gently in a cloth to carry outside. As you walk the short corridor toward the outer temple gate, you pass a row of older scribes reading aloud to themselves, soft chants of numbers, names and formulas. It's like passing through an incantation. One murmurs 4 jars of oil, 3 casks of date wine, over and over. You don't know if he's practicing or preparing for a party. And here it is, the outer gate. Sunlight hits you in the face like a slap wrapped in linen. The plaza outside shimmers with heat. A guard waves you to your post, a shaded bench near the temple granary where workers haul sacks on their backs like cursed ants. You nod politely to the foreman and settle in. Now you write. 1 line at a time, each entry recording another grain sack, another name, another date. The temple's bureaucracy may be divine in origin, but today it smells like sweat and barley. Mainstream fact temples in ancient Sumer functioned as administrative hubs, not just religious centres. They tracked trade land labour harvests and offerings. Scribes were the living backbone of this machine, documenting every sack of grain and every donkey transaction. Fringe detail. There's a record of a scribe who was demoted for embellishing entries with poetry. His barley counts became golden hills of heaven's nourishment, and his sheep tallies turned into woolly moons upon the earth. Admirable, impractical, demoted. You try not to let your own mind wander too far. You write simple things, clear things, you focus. Occasionally, a labourer waves. One even offers you a fig. You accept it gratefully. Today, figs are better than emergency onions. By the time the sun starts to dip, ever so slightly, and the plaza thins, your tablet is half filled, your stylus dulled, and your brain gently melting. But your job is done. You wrap your work and prepare to head back inside. You rise, stretch, crack your neck, and take one last look at the heat-blurred plaza. Then, tablet in hand, you begin the short walk back into the cool shadows of the temple. The commute is over for now. You return to the scriptorium with the proud, exhausted gait of a soldier returning from a battle fought entirely with styluses and bad posture. Your clay tablet is still warm in your handshaft, due to the sun, half due to the effort of mentally distinguishing one sack of barley from another for the last 2 hours. Inside, the light has softened. Afternoon is settling over the temple like a heavy reed, mathic, calm, a little drowsy. Even the pigeons have taken a break. You pass under the lintel and back into the scribe's wing, just as he too slumps dramatically onto the bench beside you. "I was head-butted by a pig," he says flatly. You blink, on purpose. "I asked if it was labelled," the pig disagreed. You nod with the solemnity such trauma deserves. Then you gently place your tablet into the drying tray and notice something peculiar. Someone has drawn a tiny stylized ox in the corner of one of the earlier tablets. You'd recognise Itus' artistic crimes anywhere. "Seriously," you mutter. He shrugs. "It's a visual aid for literacy. Now let's pull back for a minute, because what the elites are doing at this exact moment deserves its own spotlight. While you and your brethren battle oxen ink and temple tax math, the high priest is likely gliding across the compound in a litter draped with linen carried by 4 silently sweating servants. He's probably sipping chilled fig water, having his shoulders fanned with ostrich feathers, and complaining that the musicians are playing too slowly during the grain blessing prelude. Which brings us to how the elites commuted. Unlike you, the average temple scribe, whose sandals barely survived the trip from the clay pits to the admin desk, the elites had options, fancy ones. The high-ranking priesthood and noble families moved in style, whether by barge litter or elaborately bedecked donkey. Yes, you heard that right. The elites often used donkeys, but not the dust-covered cart-pulling donkeys of your daily commute. No, these were groomed, perfumed, and often dressed in dyed linen blankets and bells. Some wore decorative headpieces, some were trained to walk in ceremonial rhythm, and all of them you suspect had better dental hygiene than you. Historical fact check. Sumerian elites often travelled by river barge, particularly if they needed to cross from one temple district to another. These barges weren't just transport, they were status symbols, sometimes painted, sometimes carved, and occasionally accompanied by a small ensemble of flute players. And the quirky add-on. One fragment of a hymn describes Inanna arriving on a riverboat, trimmed with lapis and laden with song, while her mortal priestesses accompanied her on shore, singing her praises and ensuring her hair remained untouched by breeze. Try asking for that on your next ferry ride. You mention this to E2 as he sharpens a stylus with the focused hatred of someone slowly losing an argument with geometry. "It's not fair," he grumbles. "You know what I had to ride last week? A sack of bricks." "No, beside a sack of bricks, on foot, in the rain." You nod understanding, and the priest passed me in a cart lined with silk, offered me a date like I was a starving donkey. You both fall silent for a moment, mourning the discrepancy between classes with the silent dignity of low-grade functionaries. Then movement. The bells at the western wall chime softly, 3 then 1. That's the signal. The last ferry of the afternoon is returning. If you're going to send out any final messages or complaints, now is the time. You look at your pile of half-dried tablets. One of them is labelled Doc Delivery Urgent. You're tempted to mark it less urgent, but the last time you tried that you got assigned fish weighing duty for a week. Instead you carry it toward the messenger's table, where 2 lean boys sort dried tablets into woven trays. They nod as you approach, and one jots your name in a tally record with incredible flair for someone writing barley 9 measures. You drop the tablet nod in return and walk away. That's all you can do today. On your way back through the courtyard, you catch sight of a litter just exiting the far gate, a noblewoman's transport, judging by the embroidery. She reclines under a shaded canopy, fanned by 2 apprentices, as her donkey clip-clops along in beaded sandals. Yes, even the donkey is wearing sandals. You watch them go, not with envy, but with a sort of philosophical sigh. It must be nice, you think, to glide instead of trudge, to arrive cool and clean, rather than blotched and smudged. But then again, do they get to name new storage rooms, the Hall of Forgotten Lentils? Do they get to draw tiny oxen on official records? Doubtful. The afternoon continues in its steady descent. The light is golden now, washing over the courtyard, like warm barley beer. You sit again, pull out one last scrap of clay, and begin jotting down notice little moments from the day. Not for the temple, for yourself. You write, saw a snake near the reed shrine again. Possible omen, or the same snake really bored. Clouds in the north today, Utu must be blinking. Saw a child singing to a fish in a bowl, fish unimpressed. These are not sacred lines. They won't be archived, but they belong to you. And as the breeze finally stirs and someone brings out the leftover lentil stew, you realise something. The elites may commute with music and shade, but you walk the real path. Feet in the dust, head in the clouds, stylus in hand. And sometimes that's enough. You stay seated a little longer than necessary, letting the weight of the day settle into your bones, like sand into the cracks of a drying tablet. The courtyard hums around you with the familiar murmurs of scribes wrapping up their work-soft conversations, gentle laughter and the rhythmic clack of styluses tapping excess clay from corners. Then bells again. Not the temple bells this time. These are higher-pitched, more erratic, strung together like someone tied musical beads to a goat and let it loose. You glance toward the plaza entrance and squint. Yes, of course. A religious procession is forming, again. Because sometimes, just when you think you're safe, just when you've mentally committed to sitting still until your spine fuses to the bench Sumerian religion remembers you exist. You groan, stand and shake off the stiffness. The sound is gritty. Out in the plaza temple, acolytes are arranging baskets of fruit piles of barley and jars of something vaguely sacred. Incense curls into the afternoon light, sharp and sweet. A boy bangs a cymbal entirely too close to your ear as he runs past. You wince. That's going to echo in your dreams tonight. At the centre of the formation is a small cart drawn by two priests and one extremely uncooperative donkey. On the cart, a statue of Enlil, towering stern, his carved beard rippling like thunder itself. At his feet, a tray of offerings, including what appears to be a roasted lizard, a handful of dates and a rather nervous pigeon. You join the growing ring of temple workers watching the procession prepare. Most stand quietly. A few mumble last-minute prayers. One scribe beside you chews thoughtfully on a stick of dried leek and mutters, "Looks like Enlil's getting better snacks than we are." Here comes your mainstream history, moment, ritual. Processions were integral to Mesopotamian religious life. Gods were not static. They were walked through cities, floated down rivers, or carried from temple to temple in elaborate parades. These events reaffirmed divine presence in the community and offered the people a chance to demonstrate reverence or at least show up and not get scolded. And the fringe tidbit, some festivals involved surprise processions, unscheduled god walks, prompted by unusual omens, bad harvests, or divine dreams reported by high priests. One record describes a nighttime emergency procession after a temple cat knocked over a sacred oil lamp. The entry reads solemnly, "Enlil must be appeased. The cat is exiled." Back in the present, the priests begin chanting. The sound is low, repetitive, and deeply hypnotic. You watch as the crowd parts and the procession lumbers forward in rhythmic steps. A girl with a basket of flower petals walks just ahead of the cart, tossing them with precise, practiced grace. And there's the goat. Still garlanded, still confused. This particular goat seems to think the flower girl has food and follows her determinedly, dragging a young novice behind him like a reluctant accessory. The crowd chuckles softly as the novice pleads under his breath for divine intervention or possibly for better sandals. You find yourself caught in the procession's slow drift. You step aside as they pass, catching snippets of the chant. Strong is Enlil mighty, the wind sacred, his barley blessed the fig. You try not to smirk at the fig line. After the parade passes through the main gate, the crowd begins to break apart. Scribes head back to their stations. Priests retreat into shadowy halls. Apprentices collapse against walls, grateful that no one dropped anything expensive. You consider returning to your work table, but then something catches your eye. A boy barefoot about 7 years old is drawing shapes in the dust with a stick. He's sitting cross-legged in the shade of a palm, his tongue poking from the corner of his mouth as he scribbles furiously. You walk closer. At first it looks like nonsense, Circles, lines, waves. But then you see it. He's writing the glyph for journey, followed by goat, and then there's unmistakably chaos. You raise an eyebrow. He glances up and grins. Procession story. Where's the donkey, you ask? He points to a tiny stick figure tumbling off a cart. You both laugh. Here in this dust-drawn cartoon is the entire day, divine rituals, frustrated animals, and a city trying to make sense of both. You ruffle the boy's hair gently. He doesn't flinch, just keeps drawing, and head back to your table. You sit again. Your stylus is right where you left it. The half-used clay rests like a patient dog, waiting to be shaped into meaning. You press your fingers into it and begin crafting one final line. Procession past, flowers trampled, goat persistent. Enlil looked amused. You smile. You won't archive that tablet. It's not for the temple, it's for you. A record of absurdity. A love letter to routine. A footnote in a world made of dust and symbols. And as the bells fade into distance and the last of the chanting drifts away on the breeze, you sit there quietly shaping clay, while the city forgets the moment already past. You've written enough for one day. More than enough, really. Your fingers are stiff, your wrists starting to ache, and the edge of your stylus has worn into a small notch from too many corrections. But that's temple work. If the gods wanted legible paperwork, they probably should have invented ink sooner. You wipe your hands on the hem of your tunic, then glance upward. The courtyard is quieter now. That deep amber hush that settles when even the pigeons can't be bothered to flap. The shadows are growing longer, creeping up the temple walls like vines of dusk. Somewhere out of view, a servant shakes a rug rhythmically. Somewhere else, a donkey sighs. And so begins the final stretch, the journey home. You gather your tools and wrap your still-drying tablet in a cloth before tucking it into the carry pouch. The dried ink flakes gently off your thumb, and your shoulders crack as you stand. No one says goodbye, there's no need. These exits are ritualized now, like every other part of your day. You step through the scribe's gate and back into the fading city light. The air has shifted. It's cooler, drier, scented with a mix of earth and ash. The golden heat of afternoon has mellowed into the quiet orange glow of pre-evening. You blink into it, adjusting to the softer world. As you walk, you notice that the city has changed in your absence. The market has thinned out, many stalls now empty, their owners long gone, or slumped asleep behind baskets. A few late traders still linger, shouting half-hearted discounts on stale dates and bruised onions. The fishmonger from this morning has packed up, but the scent remains, permanently you suspect. The roads are less chaotic now, but still alive. Children weave through alleyways, laughing and kicking around a tightly bound sack of something that may once have been barley. Two women sweep their doorways in rhythmic unison, like they've rehearsed it for a festival. Someone nearby is tuning a lyre and humming off-key, and ahead a group of temple guards is arguing over who forgot to bring the evening offering to the weather shrine. You turn into a side street, one less travelled during the morning rush. It's lined with small home-squiet, familiar structures built from the same sun-baked clay as your temple. A boy chases a chicken across the path, giggling. The chicken does not share his joy. As your feet move across the dusty road, your thoughts wander too. You find yourself replaying the day, not the writing, not the counting, but all the little moments between the fish merchants, glare the child's drawing in the dust, the goat's blank stare during the procession. It's in these in-between moments that Sumer really lives. Here's your historical pause in ancient Mesopotamia. The rhythm of daily life was rarely broken. Even the walkie, homey, so ordinary, so repetitive, was guided by tradition, habit, and the sacred pulse of routine. People stopped at the same altars, greeted the same neighbours, and walked the same dusty paths for decades. And your quirky Fact A tablet, once found near the ruins of Lagash, includes a scribe's tally of his daily steps scratched in hurried script across the edge of an inventory list. It ends with the line, and still the same stones, the same dust. You know the feeling. You pass the old reed mat market. Most of the mats are rolled and stacked now, like sleepy scrolls. One vendor dozes on top of her own wares. You remember her yelling about goat theft just 2 days ago. The goat, to its credit, returned the mat. As you round the next bend, your sandal catches on a loose cobble, and you nearly stumble, but someone grabs your elbow. It's your neighbour Ardu. "You okay?" he says, steadying you with one hand and balancing a bundle of firewood in the other. "Just tired," you reply. He nods knowingly, scribes, always staring at clay when you should be staring at goats. You chuckle. "They don't let me write about goats anymore." He laughs, then shuffles off with a grunt. You watch him disappear into the alley and realise you're only a few streets from home now. The walls here are lower, the doors smaller. You pass by the corner where an old shrine to Nansha sits, just a carved brick alcove and a shallow bowl for water. Someone's placed 3 lentils in the dish. You whisper a quiet thanks to the goddess of dreams, just in case. A breeze picks up warm and dry, carrying with it the scent of burning palm leaves and distant stew. You close your eyes and breathe it in. You're nearly home. You cross the final stretch of road narrow lined with worn bricks and graffiti from a decade ago. One carving simply says, "Utu is late," with a frowning sun etched above it. You don't know who carved it. You're not sure anyone remembers, but it makes you smile every time. Then at last there it is. Your door. Not grand, not freshly painted, just a curtain over a clay frame. Home. Inside it's dim and quiet. Your cousin is snoring softly on the floor mat, the goat is sleeping in the doorway again, and someone's left half a barley cake on the table. You pick it up, it's hard as brick. You nibble anyway. You take off your pouch, set down your stylus, and stretch one last time, your back arching like the city walls themselves. And then you exhale. The day is done. The records are written, and the dust has settled. The goat stirs slightly as you step over her, emitting a noise that sounds halfway between a sigh and a judgment. You ignore it. You've survived a full Sumerian day again, and you're too tired to engage in interspecies critique. Your mat waits in the corner. It's made of woven reeds patched twice and still pokes you in the same place every night. But right now, it looks like luxury. You sink into it with the grace of a dropped tablet and finally let your spine melt into the floor. Around you, the quiet sounds of the evening unfold. A pot clinks gently from the breeze nudging it. The goat makes a small sleepy snort. Outside, sandals scuff softly past your doorway, neighbours finishing their own days. The air smells like dust warmth and faint stew. You can even hear a lullaby from somewhere down the alley, a voice rising and falling like the tigress at dusk. You turn your head and spot the tablet you brought home with you, today's log of names, numbers, and that small extra note you slipped in at the end. Donkey hesitated at Temple Gate. Maybe divine doubt. It was your favourite moment of the day. You'll probably copy that line again tomorrow, for yourself. So now finally, we ask the question, why did they write it all down? Why did Sumerians, thousands of years before typewriters or ballpoint pens or delete keys, bother recording every bundle of reeds, every goat transaction, every midday ferry dispute? Because it mattered. Because they knew that recording a thing was how you remembered it and how you made sure others remembered it too. Scribes didn't just document trade, they documented life, the sacred and the silly, the epic and the everyday, from the rise and fall of kings to the embarrassing moment when someone dropped a jar of pickled onions onto a priest's lap mid-ceremony. And so we reach your final historical note. Nearly half of all recovered cuneiform tablets are administrative or transactional. Not myths, not laws, just everyday records. Proof that even back then, someone thought it was important to keep track of who borrowed the cart, who owed how many jars of oil, and yes, who kept putting jokes into the grain logs. And here's the last quirky touch. There's a rare tablet from Nipper that appears to be nothing but scribes venting. A kind of collaborative diary. It reads like the world's oldest group chat. Today I spilled ink on my robe again. The priest asked me to recopy a tablet because his donkey sneezed on the original. Why is there always sand in the stew? You close your eyes. Your breath slows. The stone walls around you hum with the heat of the day. Your stylus rests beside you like a tiny sword. And in your mind you still hear the rhythms of the morning, the creak of carts, the flute's off-key song, the drums of a reluctant parade, and the muttered curses of scribes dodging flying onions. Tomorrow will be the same, and that's the comfort of it. Because while the city changes in its small dusty ways, the journey, the walking, the watching, the recording, it stays. And so do you. Scribe, witness, commuter of the divine absurd. You survived another day. And now, as your eyes grow heavy and the distant sounds of the ancient city fade, let yourself settle into the quiet rhythm of the night. Picture the flickering glow of an oil lamp, its light soft against the clay walls. The air is still. The world outside has slowed to a hush. No carts, no bells, just the occasional sigh of the wind through the palm fronds and the gentle rustle of sleep-warm animals curling into corners. The stone beneath you is cool. The mat beneath your back shifts gently, with each breath familiar and grounding. Your fingers stained faintly with ink, and dust rest easy. Now no more counting, no more writing, just stillness. In your mind the city dims, the roads empty. The scribes set down their styluses. Even the goats seem to know the day is done. You have walked the same path they did, step by step, through mud music and ancient paperwork, and now at last you rest as they did, wrapped in the silence of a world that once bustled, now dreaming. Let the dust settle. Let the city sleep. You've earned your rest.